You're listening to Lanterns Within Audio. And now, the story begins. The AirPods were still warm when I found them in my boyfriend's car. I know that sounds like a strange detail to remember, but sometimes your life does not fall apart with a scream. Sometimes it begins with something small and white sitting in the passenger side cup holder, glowing under the dashboard light like it has been waiting for you to notice it. It was a Thursday night in Portland, Oregon, the kind of January evening where the rain turned every streetlight into a blurry halo and everyone drove a little slower than usual. I had borrowed Ethan's car because mine was at the shop, and he had kissed my forehead before handing me the keys like nothing in the world was wrong. "Take the Subaru," he said. "I'll get a ride home from the station." Ethan worked as a paramedic, which meant unpredictable hours, missed dinners, and the kind of exhaustion that made him fall asleep sitting up with his boots still on. I had learned not to take it personally when he canceled plans. I had learned that loving someone who spent his nights saving strangers meant making room for silence, for interrupted holidays, for a phone that could ring at any moment and steal him away. We had been together for 4 years, living in the same apartment for 2, and lately everyone kept asking when he would propose. My mother asked gently. My coworkers asked loudly. My younger sister, Chloe, sent me ring posts from Instagram with messages like, "Just saying." I laughed every time, but the truth was I had started wondering too. Ethan was 33, steady, kind, and maddeningly private. I was 31, a graphic designer who believed in talking things through before they became problems. We were different in the ways couples joke about when things are good and argue about when things are not. He folded laundry like he was packing for the military. I left half-finished coffee cups in strange places. He saved receipts in a shoebox. I deleted emails I thought I would never need. He believed love showed up in action. I believed love also needed words. That difference had not hurt us at first. Lately, it had begun to. Leave bruises neither of us mentioned. The AirPods should not have mattered. People leave things in cars all the time. A coworker, a patient, a friend. That was what I told myself as I sat behind the wheel outside the grocery store, rain sliding down the windshield while my hand hovered over the little white case. But the case had a pink silicone cover with a tiny silver charm shaped like a heart. It was not Ethan's. It was not mine. When I opened it, the left earbud was missing. I stared at that empty slot longer than I should have. A ridiculous thought came first. Maybe he had given someone a ride. A reasonable thought came next. Maybe it belonged to a nurse from the hospital. Then the thought I did not want arrived quietly and sat down beside me. Maybe Ethan was lying. I hated myself for thinking it. Ethan had never given me a reason to doubt him, not a real one. But trust does not always break because someone smashes it. Sometimes it thins slowly from the weight of unanswered questions. For 3 months, Ethan had been coming home later than usual. He said the department was short-staffed. He said calls had been heavy. He said one of the newer medics needed help with training. All believable, all possible, but then there were the small things. He started taking calls in the hallway. He changed his phone password after years of using our anniversary date. He stopped leaving his Apple Watch on a nightstand. When I asked about it, he smiled tiredly and said, "Work stuff, Mia. Nothing interesting. My name is Mia Bennett, and I have always hated how quickly a woman can be made to feel unreasonable for noticing what has changed. I did not want to become the girlfriend who searched pockets and checked location history. I did not want to become suspicious and small. So I did what I always did when something scared me. I made it look manageable. I closed the AirPods case, put it back exactly where I found it, bought almond milk, spinach, and the coffee creamer Ethan liked, and drove home with both hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Our apartment smelled like laundry detergent and the rosemary candle I had lit that morning. Ethan was already there, standing in the kitchen in gray sweatpants and a navy Portland Fire and Rescue sweatshirt, stirring something on the stove. He looked up when I walked in, and for 1 second I hated how relieved I felt to see his face. "You okay?" he asked. "You look cold." I set the grocery bags on the counter. "It is raining." He gave me a soft smile. That is usually how Oregon works. Normally I would have laughed. Instead, I watched his hands. No hosetaschen, no guilt, no flinch. Just Ethan opening a cabinet, taking down 2 bowls, moving through our kitchen like a man who belonged there. Did anyone ride in your car today? I asked. The question came out too casual, which made it sound worse. He looked over his shoulder. What? Your car. Did you give someone a ride? The spoon stopped moving for half a second. Only half. But I saw it. Maybe, he said. I drove a few people around today. From work? Yes. He turned back to the stove. Why? There are moments in a relationship when the truth stands between 2 people and waits to see who will reach for it first. I wanted to say, because I found pink AirPods in your car. I wanted to watch his face. I wanted to know immediately whether my life was still what I thought it was. Instead, something in his shoulders stopped me. Not guilt exactly. Fear. No reason, I said. He nodded, but he did not relax. We ate dinner at the small table near the window while rain tapped against the glass. He told me about a man who had slipped on an icy porch and refused to admit he was hurt because his dog was watching. I smiled in the right places. I asked the right questions. All the while, the pink AirPod sat in my mind like evidence. Later that night, Ethan showered, and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times. I looked at it before I could stop myself. The screen lit up with a name I did not recognize. Lily. No last name. Just Lily. The message preview was short enough to read without touching the phone. I left something in your car. Please do not tell Mia yet. My chest went hollow. In the bathroom, the shower kept running. Steam curled beneath the door. I stood beside our bed, staring at those 7 words until they no longer looked like English. Please do not tell Mia yet. Not I am sorry. Not thanks for the ride. Not can I pick it up tomorrow. Please do not tell Mia yet. I had always believed betrayal would feel hot, like anger. It did not. It felt cold, clean, almost quiet. I picked up Ethan's phone with trembling hands, and for the first time in 4 years, I tried to unlock it. The phone felt heavier than it should have. My thumb hovered above the screen while the shower continued to run behind the bathroom door. Ethan had trusted me with almost everything for 4 years, yet that single message made every memory suddenly feel uncertain. I entered the first passcode that came to mind, our anniversary. It failed. I tried my birthday. Failed again. I lowered the phone onto the nightstand before I became someone I would no longer recognize. When Ethan walked out a few minutes later, his hair still damp from the shower, he smiled as though the evening had been completely ordinary. He noticed the phone where I had left it and casually slipped it into his pocket. Everything all right? He asked. You seem quiet tonight. I forced a smile that even I did not believe. Just tired. He stepped closer and kissed my forehead, but instead of comfort, I felt distance. I lay awake long after he had fallen asleep, replaying those 7 words over and over. Please do not tell Mia yet. They sounded less like a secret between coworkers and more like a promise between 2 people who shared something I did not. The following morning, Ethan left before sunrise for another 24-hour shift. As soon as the apartment door closed, silence settled over every room. I opened my laptop, intending to finish a client presentation, but the same thoughts interrupted every design on the screen. Around noon, my younger sister Chloe called during her lunch break. She immediately noticed something in my voice. You sound like you have been crying. I have not. Then something happened. Chloe had always possessed the annoying gift of hearing what people try to hide. After a long pause, I finally told her about the AirPods and the message. She remained silent for several seconds. Mia, she said carefully, have you asked him directly? Not really. Then you're building a courtroom without evidence. And what if the evidence is sitting right in front of me? Chloe sighed. Then you still deserve the whole truth before you decide what it means. Her words stayed with me, but doubt had already begun changing the way I saw everything. That evening, Ethan texted to say he would be home much later than expected because another crew needed assistance after a highway accident. Normally, I would have replied with a heart emoji and reminded him to eat dinner. Instead, I stared at the message until the screen went dark. 30 minutes later, curiosity defeated pride. I opened our shared location app. His phone was no longer at the emergency department. It was parked several miles away near a quiet residential neighborhood I had never visited. I closed the app immediately ashamed of myself. 5 minutes later, I opened it again. The location had not changed. By the time Ethan finally came home after midnight, exhaustion covered his face like another uniform. He apologized for missing dinner and fell asleep almost immediately. I wanted to wake him. I wanted to ask about Lily, the neighborhood, the AirPods, the password, every tiny change that had quietly collected between us. Instead, I watched him sleeping and wondered when trust had become something I was afraid to touch. The next afternoon, I met my longtime coworker Rachel for coffee. We had worked together at the design agency for 6 years, and she knew Ethan almost as well as I did. I never intended to tell her anything, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. Rachel listened without interrupting. Finally, she leaned forward and asked one question that caught me off guard. Has Ethan ever lied to you before? I searched my memory. Missed details? Yes. Forgotten errands? Absolutely. Actual lies? I cannot think of one. No, I admitted. Then something changed, Rachel replied softly. Or something happened that he believes he cannot explain yet. Neither answer comforted me. Saturday arrived with rare winter sunshine. Ethan said he needed to stop by the station for paperwork before lunch. It should only take an hour, he said. He kissed my cheek and left with a travel mug of coffee. 40 minutes later, while cleaning the apartment, I noticed he had forgotten his tablet on the dining table. A notification appeared across the lock screen. Lily, thank you for yesterday. She smiled for the first time in weeks. My heart skipped. She, not I. She smiled. Before I could make sense of it, another notification appeared. Lily, I know keeping this from Mia is hard. Again, there was that sentence. Keeping this from Mia. Not hiding us. Keeping this. The wording felt different, yet only deepened the mystery. I stood frozen until the front door suddenly opened. Ethan stepped inside, breathing hard. I forgot my tablet, he said before noticing my expression. His eyes moved to the glowing screen. For the first time since we had met, real fear crossed his face. Neither of us spoke. He slowly picked up the tablet, locked the screen, and closed his eyes for a brief moment. I was hoping, he whispered, that you would not have to find out like this. The apartment, which had always felt like the safest place either of us knew, suddenly felt too small to hold whatever truth was about to change both of our lives. For several long seconds, neither of us moved. Ethan stood just inside the apartment doorway, still holding his car keys, while I remained beside the dining table with my hands wrapped around the back of a chair. His words echoed through the room. I was hoping that you would not have to find out like this. They were not the words of an innocent man caught by surprise, nor were they the confession of someone admitting an affair. They sounded like the exhausted surrender of someone carrying a burden far too heavy alone. Then tell me, I said quietly. Please. Ethan looked toward the living room window before meeting my eyes again. I cannot. Not yet. The answer hurt more than if he had shouted. Not yet. My voice cracked despite my effort to stay calm. You change your phone password. You have been disappearing. A woman keeps texting you, asking you not to tell me. I find AirPods in your car. You visit neighborhoods you never mentioned. And now you are asking me for more time. Ethan rubbed both hands across his face. I am asking you to trust me. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. That is exactly what I have been trying to do. He stepped closer, but I instinctively took one step back. The movement landed harder than any argument. I watched the realization spread across his face as he understood that something fundamental between us had shifted. He nodded slowly, picked up the forgotten tablet, and quietly left the apartment without another word. The silence that followed felt unbearable. I sank onto the couch, staring at the closed front door until my vision blurred. For years together. And somehow we had reached a place where trust had become a request instead of certainty. I wanted to believe him. Every part of me wanted to believe him. But trust without truth had begun to feel like blindness. 2 days passed with polite conversations and careful distance. Ethan continued coming home late. I continued pretending to sleep whenever he climbed into bed. We spoke about groceries, laundry, and work schedules with painful normality, as though avoiding the one conversation that mattered could somehow preserve what remained. Tuesday afternoon, while finishing a client meeting downtown, I received another unexpected message. It was from an unknown number. Mia. My name is Lily. I think we should meet. I stared at the screen until the words lost their meaning. A second message followed almost immediately. Ethan does not know I'm contacting you. My heartbeat quickened. Every instinct told me to ignore it. Every unanswered question pushed me toward replying. Where? She sent the address of a small neighborhood coffee shop on the east side of Portland. I arrived 15 minutes early. The cafe was warm, filled with quiet conversations and the smell of fresh espresso. I chose a table near the window where I could see everyone who entered. Every woman who walked through the door made my stomach tighten. At exactly 3 o'clock, a young blonde woman stepped inside, carrying a navy backpack and looking around uncertainly. She could not have been older than 26. She spotted me, offered a nervous smile, and slowly approached. Mia? I nodded. I am Lily. She looked nothing like the woman I had imagined over countless sleepless nights. She wore no expensive jewelry, no glamorous makeup, no confident smile. Instead, she looked exhausted. There were faint dark circles beneath her eyes, and she kept twisting a paper coffee sleeve between her fingers. Thank you for coming, she said. I almost did not. I know. For several seconds, neither of us touched the coffee, sitting untouched between us. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. Are you in love with Ethan? Her head lifted instantly. What? Please do not lie to me. Shock flashed across her face before something that looked almost like sadness replaced it. No, she answered firmly. Absolutely not. Then why are you texting my boyfriend? Why are your AirPods in his car? Why are you asking him to keep secrets from me? Lily closed her eyes briefly. I knew this would happen. She reached into her backpack. For one terrifying second, I thought she was about to hand me photographs or messages proving everything I feared. Instead, she removed a folded children's drawing, a crayon drawing. 3 people stood beneath a bright yellow sun. 1 tall man, 1 little girl, 1 woman with long brown hair. Across the top, written in uneven handwriting, were the words, "My family." My breathing slowed. Who drew that? I whispered. Lily looked down at the picture before answering. My little sister. I frowned. Your sister? Lily nodded. Her name is Emily. She is 7. Nothing about the conversation was unfolding the way I had expected. Lily carefully folded the drawing again. Ethan met Emily 3 months ago. Exactly 3 months. The same moment everything between Ethan and me had begun changing. He saved her life, Lily continued quietly. The cafe suddenly seemed much smaller. What happened? There was an apartment fire. She swallowed before continuing. Our parents died that night. The words hung heavily between us. I could not immediately respond. My sister survived because Ethan carried her out himself. Tears filled Lily's eyes. He stayed with her until I arrived at the hospital. Hospital. My mind instantly returned to the pink AirPods, the hospital bracelet, the late-night calls, the unexplained disappearances. Every clue rearranged itself into something different, yet still incomplete. If that is true, I said carefully, why all the secrecy? Lily looked away toward the cafe window. Because that is not the whole story. She hesitated long enough for me to feel my heartbeat rising once again. Then she quietly added, there is one thing Ethan has been hiding from you, and it has nothing to do with another woman. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I realized I might have been asking the wrong question all along. The words settled between us like a weight neither of us knew how to carry. It has nothing to do with another woman. I searched Lily's face for any sign that she was lying, but all I found was exhaustion. She looked like someone who had not slept through a single night in months. Then tell me everything, I said. Lily wrapped both hands around her coffee cup without drinking from it. After the fire, Emily spent almost 2 weeks at Randall Children's Hospital. She had smoke inhalation, burns on one arm, and nightmares every night. She would wake up screaming for the firefighter who carried her outside. I remembered the hospital bracelet. Suddenly, it no longer felt like evidence of betrayal. It felt like evidence of a promise. That firefighter was Ethan, Lily continued. He kept visiting after his shifts ended. At first, he said he only wanted to check on one of his patients. Then Emily started asking when he was coming back. She trusted him more than anyone. I listened without interrupting. My heart wanted to believe every word, but another part of me refused to let go so easily. That still does not explain why he hid everything from me. Lily lowered her eyes. Because of me, you? She nodded slowly. I am 26. I work part-time while finishing nursing school. After our parents died, Child Protective Services placed Emily with a temporary foster family while they evaluated whether I could become her legal guardian. I wanted to take her home immediately, but I did not have enough income, and I was sharing an apartment with 2 roommates. Ethan started helping us. He drove Emily to therapy appointments when I had classes. He picked up groceries. Sometimes he stayed with her for an hour so I could work an extra shift. She stopped and took a shaky breath. People talk. A young woman. A firefighter. They started assuming things. Ethan knew how rumors spread. I stared at the table. Everything she described sounded exactly like the man I had fallen in love with. Kind, reliable, quietly generous. So why ask him not to tell me? I finally asked. Lily's expression changed from sadness to regret. Because I was ashamed, she swallowed hard. I did not want the woman he loved to think I was using him. I kept saying I would explain everything myself when my guardianship hearing was over. I thought it would only take a few weeks. Then more paperwork came. More delays. Every week I told him, not yet. Every week it became harder. I remembered the message exactly as it had appeared on Ethan's phone. Please do not tell Mia yet. Not because of an affair. Because of a promise. Yet something still did not fit. Why change his phone password? Lily looked surprised. He changed it. I nodded. I did not know that. Why was he visiting that neighborhood? That is where Emily's foster family lives. The AirPods. Lily let out a small, embarrassed laugh. Mine. Emily borrowed one during a car ride because she gets carsick if she cannot listen to music. We forgot the case in Ethan's Subaru. Every answer closed one question, but opened another. If everything is innocent, I said quietly, why has he been pushing me away? Lily looked at me for a long moment before answering. I did not think he was pushing you away. Then what? I think he was trying to protect everyone at the same time. I wanted to argue, but deep inside I knew that sounded painfully like Ethan. He had always believed carrying problems alone was an act of love. It was one of the qualities I admired most when we met. It had become one of the things hurting us most now. My phone buzzed on the table. Ethan. I stared at his name without answering. Lily noticed. You should talk to him. I do not know if I am ready. He probably is not either. We both smiled sadly at the truth of that. As we stood to leave, Lily reached in her backpack once more. This time, she handed me a folded sheet of paper. What is this? A copy of the court's schedule. I unfolded it. Across the top were the words, Petition for Guardianship. Ethan's name appeared several times under the section listing character references and supporting witnesses. He was not trying to become Emily's guardian. He was helping Lily prove she could become one. Suddenly, months of late nights, unexpected phone calls, and secret meetings formed a picture I had never imagined. Relief began creeping into the cracks left by suspicion, but it was accompanied by something heavier. Guilt. I had spent weeks building a story in my mind while the man I loved had been helping 2 sisters rebuild their lives. Yet one question remained unanswered. If Ethan had been acting out of kindness, why had he believed he could not trust me with the truth? That question stayed with me all the way home. When I opened the apartment door that evening, Ethan was already sitting alone at the kitchen table. In front of him lay the pink AirPods case. Beside it rested a small stack of legal documents. He looked up as I entered, his eyes red with exhaustion. I think, he said softly, we have both been carrying something alone for far too long. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The apartment was so quiet that I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Ethan sat with his hands folded together, the pink AirPods case resting beside a stack of court documents. He looked more tired than I had ever seen him, not because of another overnight shift, but because he had finally reached the point where carrying everything alone was no longer possible. I slowly walked to the table and sat across from him. Between us lay weeks of silence, suspicion, and hurt. Ethan slid the documents toward me without saying a word. On the first page was the guardianship petition Lily had shown me only an hour earlier. There were letters from social workers, hospital, staff, firefighters, and neighbors. Ethan's statement described the night of the apartment fire, Emily's recovery, and Lily's determination to keep her sister out of the foster care system. His words were simple, honest, and completely consistent with the man I knew. I finished reading before looking back up. "You should have told me," I whispered. Ethan closed his eyes. "I know. Why didn't you?" He took a slow breath. "Because every time I wanted to, something changed." He explained that the attorney handling Lily's case had repeatedly warned everyone involved to protect Emily's privacy until the hearing was complete. There had already been unwanted attention from distant relatives who suddenly wanted custody after learning about an insurance settlement connected to the fire. Ethan feared that sharing details, even accidentally, could complicate the case or expose Emily to more instability. "I trusted you," he said softly. "I just didn't want to put you in a position where you had to keep a secret that wasn't yours." I listened carefully, but the ache inside me did not disappear. Instead, I replied, "You put me in a position where I believed I was losing you." His shoulders dropped. "I never saw it that way." "That is exactly the problem." Tears gathered in my eyes before I could stop them. "You kept making decisions for both of us. You decided what I could handle. You decided what I needed to know. You decided that protecting me meant shutting me out." Ethan lowered his head. He did not interrupt or defend himself. "Every night you came home exhausted," I continued. "I kept asking if everything was all right. Every time you said yes, another piece of trust disappeared. It wasn't because of Lily. It was because you stopped letting me stand beside you." The words hung heavily between us. Ethan finally looked up, and I could see genuine regret in his eyes. "You are right." There was no excuse, no explanation, just 4 quiet words. Somehow, they hurt less than any argument could have. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small envelope. I was waiting until after the guardianship hearing. He handed it to me. Inside was a folded brochure from a local family counseling center. My name and his were already written on the appointment form. "I made this appointment 3 weeks ago," he admitted. "I knew I was handling everything the wrong way. I just kept thinking that once Emily was safe, I could finally explain everything, apologize, and fix us." I looked at the date. It had been scheduled before I ever found the AirPods. "You already knew we were falling apart." He nodded slowly. "Every day." I wiped away a tear. "Then why didn't you stop it?" Ethan gave a tired smile that carried more sadness than hope. "Because I've spent my entire career believing that if I worked harder, stayed calmer, and carried more weight, eventually everyone else would be safe." He paused before quietly adding, "I never realized that sometimes the people I love need me to share the weight instead." His confession reached deeper than any dramatic revelation could have. This was never a story about another woman. It was about 2 people who loved each other enough to protect one another, yet ended up creating loneliness instead. My phone vibrated. It was Chloe checking on me. I silenced it and reached across the table. For the first time in weeks, I took Ethan's hand. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us pretended everything was suddenly fixed. Trust does not return in a single conversation. It returns one honest moment at a time. Ethan squeezed my hand gently. "Tomorrow is the hearing," he said. "If Lily becomes Emily's guardian, this part of their life finally ends." I looked at him carefully. "And ours?" He hesitated before answering. "Ours begins again only if you still want it to." His words were not a promise. They were an invitation. I realized then that forgiveness would not arrive because the misunderstanding had been explained. It would arrive only if we both chose a different way of loving each other. As we sat together in the quiet apartment, another notification appeared on Ethan's phone. He glanced at the screen, then immediately turned it toward me without unlocking it. For the first time in months, there were no hidden messages, no protected conversations, no invisible walls. The preview simply read, "The judge moved. The hearing to 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." Ethan left the phone on the table between us. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant. Yet somehow it meant more than every explanation that had come before. Outside, The rain that had followed Portland for weeks finally stopped, and for the first time in a long while, the silence inside our home no longer felt empty. The next morning arrived with a pale winter sky stretching across Portland. The rain had disappeared overnight, leaving the streets unusually quiet. Ethan and I drove to the courthouse together without turning on the radio. The silence between us no longer felt hostile, but it was still fragile, as though one careless word could undo everything we had rebuilt the night before. Halfway there, Ethan reached across the center console and rested his hand gently over mine. "Thank you for coming." I looked out the window before answering. "I'm not here because everything is fixed. I know. I'm here because Emily deserves people who keep their promises." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly why she's going to be okay." The courthouse was smaller than I expected. It looked less like a place where lives changed forever and more like an ordinary government building with faded brick walls and security guards greeting people by name. Inside, Lily stood near the entrance holding Emily's hand. Emily immediately recognized Ethan. Without hesitation, she let go of her sister's hand and ran toward him. "Ethan!" He knelt just before she reached him. She wrapped both arms around his neck. "I thought you couldn't come. I promised I'd be here. You always keep your promises." The words landed somewhere deep inside me. For weeks, I had questioned the man standing beside me. Yet to this little girl, he represented safety itself. Emily finally noticed me standing nearby. She looked at Ethan curiously. "Who's she?" Ethan smiled. "This is Mia." Emily tilted her head. "The Mia?" A nervous laugh escaped Lily. "I'm sorry." Emily looked embarrassed. "He talks about you all the time." My eyes immediately found Ethan's. He looked equally surprised. "Ido." Emily nodded enthusiastically. "You said she's the bravest person." "You know," I felt my throat tighten. "You said she always makes people feel like they're home." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking far less like the confident paramedic I knew. I guess I did. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without forcing it. The courtroom hearing lasted less than an hour. The judge carefully reviewed financial records, testimony from social workers, letters from teachers, and a recommendation from the Children's Hospital. Then came Ethan's statement. He walked to the witness stand calmly. "I've responded to hundreds of emergencies," he began. "I've learned that saving someone's life doesn't end when the fire is out." The courtroom grew perfectly still. Sometimes surviving is only the beginning. He glanced toward Lily and Emily. "I watched this young woman lose both parents in a single night." He nodded toward Lily. "I watched her refuse to give up." He looked at Emily. "And I watched a little girl continue believing tomorrow would be better." His voice remained steady. "They don't need another rescuer. They already have each other. They simply need the chance to stay together." When he returned to his seat beside me, I quietly slipped my hand into his. This time, he didn't hesitate. The judge recessed briefly before returning with the decision. After several formal statements, she smiled gently. "The court grants permanent legal guardianship of Emily Foster to her sister, Lily Foster." Lily burst into tears. Emily threw both arms around her. Several people in the courtroom quietly applauded before realizing they probably shouldn't. Even a bailiff smiled. Outside the courthouse, winter sunlight finally broke through the clouds. Emily ran across the small courtyard, chasing pigeons while Lily thanked every person who had supported them. She eventually stopped in front of me. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For becoming the reason you doubted someone who loves you." I shook my head. "No, I became the reason." She looked confused. "I forgot that trust isn't just about believing someone. It's also about letting them carry the truth with you." Lily smiled softly. I think Ethan finally learned that too. Across the courtyard, Ethan was laughing as Emily insisted on showing him a tiny stuffed fox she had carried everywhere since the fire. She held it up proudly. "I named him Smokey." Ethan laughed. "That's a perfect firefighter name." Watching them together, I finally understood something I had missed from the very beginning. Love had never been pulling Ethan away from me. Love had simply been asking more of him than he knew how to share. As we prepared to leave, Ethan stopped beside me. "There's somewhere I'd like to take you. Now, if you're willing." 20 minutes later, we pulled into a quiet neighborhood overlooking the Columbia River. At the end of a tree-lined street stood a small white house with a wraparound porch. Fresh paint, new flower boxes beneath the windows, a wooden swing hanging from the front porch. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It is. Whose house is it?" Ethan reached into his jacket and removed a small envelope. Unlike every secret he had carried these past months, this one he placed directly into my hands. Inside was a single key, and beneath it, a purchase agreement. Both of our names were printed across the top. I looked at him in complete disbelief. I bought nothing without you." His eyes filled with emotion. "I only waited because I wanted to ask you here." He slowly lowered himself onto one knee. "Not with a ring. Not yet. Just honesty. Mia, I almost lost the best thing in my life because I thought protecting you meant shutting you out. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I've learned the difference." He took a slow breath. "So before I ask you to marry me someday, will you first choose to start over with me today?" For a moment, the entire world seemed to stand perfectly still. Then I stepped forward, pulled him to his feet, and wrapped my arms around him before he could say another word. Sometimes the strongest relationships are not the ones that never break. They're the ones brave enough to rebuild, with nothing left hidden between them. The drive home felt different. For the first time in months, neither Ethan nor I searched for the right words. We simply talked about ordinary things. The bakery that had finally reopened after the flood. Emily's obsession with her stuffed fox. The old coffee shop where we had gone on our first date. It amazed me how quickly life could begin to sound normal again once the truth had replaced fear. As we pulled into the apartment parking lot, Ethan turned off the engine but didn't reach for the door. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "I don't want us to go back to who we were." I looked at him. "I don't either." He smiled. "I want us to become the people we almost lost." That sentence stayed with me long after we walked upstairs. Over the next several weeks, our lives slowly settled into a new rhythm. Every Wednesday evening, Ethan and I attended couples counseling together. The first session felt awkward. The second felt honest. By the fourth, we had stopped trying to prove who had been right and started asking how we could be better. One evening, our counselor asked a question that neither of us expected. "What frightened you the most?" Ethan answered first. "Losing Mia." The counselor nodded before turning toward me. "And you?" I didn't answer immediately. I think I was more afraid of becoming someone who couldn't trust. The room became very quiet. The counselor smiled gently. "Then neither of you is really fighting each other. You were both fighting fear." Spring arrived quietly. Cherry blossoms appeared throughout Portland, replacing gray skies with soft shades of pink. One Saturday afternoon, Lily invited us to Emily's 8th birthday party. The celebration took place in a small neighborhood park. Nothing extravagant. Homemade cupcakes, paper decorations, children chasing bubbles, parents drinking coffee from paper cups. Yet somehow it felt richer than any expensive celebration I had ever attended. Emily ran straight toward us. "Mia." She threw her arms around my waist. "You came. I promised." She grinned. "Then you're just like Ethan." I laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." She reached into her backpack. "I made something." She handed me a folded piece of construction paper covered with glitter. Inside was a family drawing. This time there were 5 people. Emily, Lily, Ethan, me, and Smokey the stuffed fox. Above us she had written in careful block letters, "The people who stayed." I felt tears gather before I even realized I was crying. Ethan quietly slipped his hand into mine. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. As the afternoon ended, Lily walked beside me while Emily chased pigeons across the grass. "I've never thanked you." "You already did." "No." She shook her head. "I thank you for forgiving Ethan." "I'm thanking you for forgiving me." I looked at her, confused. "You didn't do anything wrong. I almost let him lose the person he loved because I kept asking him to wait." I smiled softly. "We all made mistakes." She nodded. "But not everyone gets another chance." Across the park, Ethan lifted Emily onto his shoulders while she laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. People turned to watch. Some smiled without knowing why. Because joy has a way of spreading even when strangers don't know its story. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Ethan and I returned to the White House overlooking the Columbia River. The setting sun painted the river gold. We sat together on the porch swing in complete silence. Finally, Ethan reached into his jacket. I looked at him suspiciously. Another envelope? He laughed. No, this one's much smaller. He placed a velvet box in my hand. I almost proposed months ago. I'd already bought the ring. I thought I needed the perfect moment. He looked toward the river. Turns out, perfect moments don't exist. Only honest ones. Slowly, I opened the box. Inside rested a simple platinum ring with a single oval diamond catching the last light of the evening. He didn't kneel this time. He simply looked into my eyes. No more secrets. No more carrying the world alone. No more deciding what you deserve to know. He took a slow breath. Mia Bennett. Will you marry me? I couldn't stop smiling. Only if we promise something first. Anything. If life ever becomes too heavy again. We carry it together. Tears filled his eyes as he nodded. Together. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Somewhere beyond the porch, the Columbia River continued its endless journey toward the ocean. I realized relationships were much the same. They were never meant to remain perfectly still. They survived because they kept moving through storms, through silence, through forgiveness, always finding their way back to the people willing to travel together. The engagement brought more than celebration. It brought decisions. 2 weeks after Ethan proposed, cardboard boxes slowly began filling the corners of our apartment. Every evening after work, we packed another shelf, another closet, another chapter of the life we had built inside those familiar walls. The White House overlooking the Columbia River no longer felt like a dream. It felt like home waiting patiently for us. One Saturday morning, Ethan stood in the middle of the living room holding an old ceramic mug with a chipped handle. You still have this? I laughed. You gave it to me on our 3rd date. I can't believe you kept it. I can't believe you bought it from a gas station. It was all I could afford. It became my favorite mug. He smiled. Maybe I should stop apologizing for where I started. Maybe, I replied, sealing another moving box. You should finally believe that I've never loved you for what you could buy. He walked over and kissed my forehead. I think I'm finally learning. Moving day arrived beneath clear blue skies. Friends from the fire station volunteered their trucks. Rachel organized the kitchen boxes with military precision. Chloe somehow turned unpacking into a dance party. Even Lily arrived with homemade sandwiches, while Emily proudly carried a tiny box labeled books. It's not heavy, she insisted. I'm helping. You absolutely are, Ethan told her. Watching everyone work together, I realized something I had never truly understood before. Family wasn't defined by who shared your last name. It was built by the people who showed up when there was nothing to gain. By sunset, almost everything had found its place. The last unopened box sat in the corner of the living room. Ethan looked at the label. Garage. We can leave that until tomorrow. I agreed. After everyone left, we ordered pizza, sat on the hardwood floor, and ate. Straight from the box because we hadn't unpacked the dining table yet. This is exactly how I imagined our first night here, Ethan said. No furniture. Just you. I laughed. And pizza. And pizza. For the first time in months, laughter filled our home without being interrupted by fear. A week later, life surprised us again. It was nearly 9 at night when the doorbell rang. I opened the front door to find Emily standing on the porch with Lily. Emily held Smokey tightly against her chest. Her eyes were red from crying. What happened? Lily looked exhausted. Our apartment building lost power after a transformer fire. The repairs may take a few days. I didn't know where else to go. Before she could finish apologizing, Ethan stepped beside me. You don't have to explain. This house has plenty of room. Emily looked up hopefully. Can Smokey stay too? Ethan smiled. I don't think the house would feel complete without him. Within an hour, the upstairs guest room had become Emily's temporary bedroom. She carefully placed Smokey on the pillow before climbing into bed. Mia. Yes. Do you think houses remember people? The question caught me off guard. I think people leave love behind. And maybe houses remember that. Emily nodded thoughtfully. I like that. She fell asleep only minutes later. Late that night, Ethan and I stood quietly in the hallway outside the guest room. We've come a long way, he whispered. We have. Almost lost all of this. You almost lost yourself. He looked down. I did. I reached for his hand. But you found your way back. He squeezed my fingers gently. Because you waited. I shook my head. No, we found our way back because we both decided to keep walking. The following Monday, Lily received a phone call while she was making breakfast. Her expression changed almost immediately. When she hung up, tears filled her eyes. What's wrong? I asked. She looked at Ethan. The insurance company finally approved everything. They're releasing the settlement. Emily looked confused. What does that mean? Lily knelt beside her. It means we can finally start over. Emily smiled. Can we still visit? I answered before anyone else could. This house doesn't stop being yours just because you get another one. Emily ran toward me and wrapped her arms around my waist. I knew you'd say that. Across the kitchen, Ethan quietly watched us. His eyes met mine. Neither of us spoke. We both understood the same thing. Months earlier, one forgotten pair of AirPods had nearly destroyed everything we loved. Now, because we had finally chosen honesty over fear, our home had somehow become bigger than the two of us. It had become a place where broken hearts could rest, where frightened children could sleep peacefully, and where second chances were no longer just something people hoped for. There was something people lived. The house grew quieter after Lily and Emily moved into their new apartment. Not emptier, just quieter. Every room still carried traces of the laughter they had left behind. One morning, while watering the flower boxes beneath the front windows, I noticed a tiny plastic fox tucked between the marigolds. Smokey. Emily must have forgotten him. I smiled, picked him up, and placed him on the kitchen windowsill. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Mia. Emily's voice burst through the speaker. I forgot Smokey. I know. Is he lonely? I laughed. Not anymore. Can he stay with you until I visit? I think he'd like that. I think so too. When I hung up, Ethan looked at the little fox sitting by the window. I have a feeling he's becoming part of the family. I think he already is. Life slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Ethan continued working long shifts with Portland Fire and Rescue. I accepted a promotion at the design agency after months of turning down additional responsibility. This time, before saying yes, I talked to Ethan first. Not because I needed permission, because I wanted him to walk through the decision with me. That evening, we celebrated with takeout Thai food on the back porch. You're really going to lead the new design team? I think so. You'll be amazing. I smiled. I was terrified to accept. Why? I kept thinking work might pull me away from us. Ethan looked toward the river. Then we'll notice. Sooner. What if we don't? He reached for my hand. We promised. No more carrying things alone. His words reminded me how different our conversations had become. Months earlier, we would have hidden our fears to protect each other. Now we spoke them aloud, and somehow they became smaller. Near the end of April, Rachel stopped by after work. She walked through the front door, carrying a bakery box. I brought pie. You don't even know if we like pie. I know, Ethan. She grinned. So statistically speaking, someone in this house likes pie. She was right. Over coffee and dessert, Rachel looked around the living room. You two seem. She searched for the right word. Lighter. I looked toward Ethan, who was trying unsuccessfully to convince Smokey to balance on top of the television. We are. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. I've been watching couples for years. Most relationships don't end because someone stops loving. They end because people stop letting themselves be known. Her words lingered long after she left. That night, I wrote them in my journal. Not to remember Rachel, to remember us. A month later, Ethan came home carrying a small cardboard box. I found something while cleaning my locker. What is it? He opened the box. Inside rested the pink AirPods case. I stared at it for several seconds before laughing. The famous AirPods. The ones that nearly destroyed my life. Our life. He nodded. Do you know what I almost did? What? I almost threw them away. Why didn't you? He looked at me. Because I don't want to erase what happened. I want to remember what we learned. He placed the case on the bookshelf beside framed photographs from our first hiking trip, our engagement, and Emily's birthday party. Anyone visiting the house would think it was an ordinary AirPods case. Only we knew it represented the moment our relationship almost disappeared, and the moment it began again. Summer arrived with long evenings and warm breezes drifting across the Columbia River. One Saturday, Emily insisted we all meet at the neighborhood park. She had something important to announce. When everyone gathered beneath the old maple tree, she climbed onto a picnic bench. "I have news." Lily laughed. "What kind of news?" Emily proudly held up a certificate. "I got first place in my reading contest." Everyone applauded. Then she looked directly at Ethan and me. "And I wrote my first story." "You did?" She nodded. "It's about firefighters and sisters and people who stay." She handed the notebook to Ethan. He read the first page silently before his eyes filled with tears. He passed it to me. Across the top, written in careful second-grade handwriting, was the title, "The Day I Found My Forever Family." I looked up at Emily. "You know," I whispered, "that's a beautiful title." She smiled proudly. "I think happy stories deserve beautiful titles." As the sun slowly disappeared behind the trees, I realized something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. Months ago, I believed the greatest threat to love was betrayal. Now I knew something different. The greatest threat was silence. And the greatest gift two people could ever give each other was the courage to speak before silence had the chance to become distance. Autumn arrived, almost unnoticed. The maple trees lining our street traded their summer green for deep shades of amber and crimson, covering the sidewalks with leaves that Emily insisted were nature's confetti. Every other Saturday, she and Lily came over for dinner. It slowly became a tradition none of us ever planned. Ethan grilled in the backyard. I baked whatever dessert Emily requested that week. Lily always arrived carrying something homemade, even after we reminded her she never needed to bring anything. "This doesn't feel like visiting anymore," she said one evening while setting a casserole dish on the kitchen counter. "What does it feel like?" I asked. She smiled. "Coming home." One rainy Thursday, Ethan called me unexpectedly during lunch. "Can you meet me at the station after work? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, but I want to show you something." Curiosity stayed with me all afternoon. When I arrived at Portland Fire and Rescue, Ethan was waiting outside the engine bay. Several firefighters waved as I walked in. "So this is Mia. We've heard a lot about you." I laughed. "I hope only the good stories." "Mostly." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Don't encourage them." The crew laughed. It was the first time I had truly stepped into the world that had shaped so much of the man I loved. Photographs covered one wall. Retirement plaques. Rescue medals. Pictures of families. Pictures of lives forever connected by moments most people never witnessed. Ethan stopped in front of a framed photograph. It showed his entire crew standing beside Engine 14. In the front row stood a little girl wearing an oversized firefighter helmet. "Emily. She visits every month," Ethan said quietly. "The captain says she reminds everyone why they chose this job." I looked around the room again. Every firefighter who passed by smiled when they saw her picture. She had become part of their story, too. As we prepared to leave, an older firefighter approached us. Gray hair, gentle eyes, a calm voice. "You must be Mia." "I am." He extended his hand. "I'm Captain Reynolds. Ethan talks about you more than he realizes." I smiled. "So I've heard." The captain glanced toward Ethan before speaking again. "I've supervised firefighters for nearly 30 years. I've seen brave people. I've seen stubborn people. And I've seen people who carry too much." He rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder. This young man almost worked himself into the ground trying to save everyone. Then he looked back at me. "I'm glad someone finally taught him that heroes need rescuing too." Neither Ethan nor I spoke during the drive home. We didn't need to. Some compliments stay with you longer than applause ever could. A few weeks later, the counseling sessions came to an end. Our counselor smiled as she closed the final folder. "I have one last question." Ethan and I exchanged a glance. "What have you learned?" Ethan answered first. "I learned that honesty isn't something you save until the timing feels right. It's something you practice every day. The counselor nodded before turning toward me. And you? I thought carefully before answering. I learned that trust isn't believing someone will never hurt you. It's believing you'll both choose truth before fear. The counselor smiled. I think you're ready. When we stepped outside, Ethan slipped his hand into mine. No more Wednesday appointments. No, but maybe that's not a bad thing. He laughed. I'll miss the cookies in the waiting room. You mean the therapy? I meant the cookies. I nudged him playfully. Liar. Former liar. We both laughed. The following Sunday, while organizing boxes in the garage, I found an old notebook tucked behind a stack of winter coats. Inside were sketches from years ago, dream vacations, apartment floor plans, baby names, random grocery lists, plans we had made before life interrupted us. Ethan looked over my shoulder. I forgot we wrote all of this. So did I. Near the final page, a sentence written in my own handwriting caught my attention. Build a home where people always feel safe enough to tell the truth. I stared at the words for a long time. I wrote this before we even moved in together. Ethan read the sentence twice. Then he quietly closed the notebook. I think. He looked around our home. We finally built it. Outside, the evening lights slowly flickered on across the neighborhood. Inside, laughter drifted down the hallway as Emily chased Smokey through the living room, while Lily tried unsuccessfully to catch them both. I leaned against Ethan's shoulder and realized that some dreams don't come true the way we imagine. Sometimes they arrive disguised as misunderstandings, heartbreak, forgiveness, and second chances. And when they finally arrive, they feel less like wishes fulfilled and more like a life patiently waiting for us to grow into it. The first snowfall arrived in early December. Only a light dusting. Just enough to cover the porch railing and soften the rooftops across the neighborhood. Emily pressed both hands against the living room window. It's snowing. Ethan looked up from the kitchen. It sure is. She spun around. Can we build a snowman? There isn't enough snow. She folded her arms dramatically. That's a very grown-up answer. I laughed. I think she's asking if you'll try anyway. Ethan looked at the backyard before pretending to sigh. I suppose firefighters are trained for impossible missions. Emily cheered. Within minutes, the three of us were outside, rolling every bit of snow we could find across the lawn. The snowman barely reached Emily's shoulders. Its head leaned slightly to one side. The carrot nose kept falling off. It looks funny, Emily giggled. It looks determined, Ethan corrected. I think. I added, it looks loved. Emily stepped back to admire it. That's better than perfect. A few days later, Lily called while I was finishing work. Do you have a minute? Of course. Her voice sounded unusually emotional. I receive an offer. What kind of offer? The Children's Hospital. They want me to join their pediatric nursing program after graduation. That's incredible. I almost turned it down. Why? It would mean moving across the city. I smiled. Lily, you taught me something this year. What? Home isn't an address. It's the people who never stop finding you. I felt tears gathering again. Then you'll never be far away. I know. That weekend, our families gathered for an early Christmas dinner at the White House. Rachel arrived carrying far too many desserts. Captain Reynolds surprised everyone with homemade smoked brisket. Several firefighters from Engine 14 stopped by after their shift. The house overflowed with conversation. Someone turned on old Christmas music. Emily insisted everyone decorate cookies. Captain Reynolds quietly watched the room before leaning toward me. You know what I see? What? A rescue. I looked around confused. I don't understand. He smiled. Most people think rescue ends when the ambulance leaves. It doesn't. Sometimes, it's what happens afterward. He nodded toward Ethan laughing with Emily. That's the part people rarely witness. Later that evening, Ethan disappeared for several minutes. I eventually found him standing alone on the back porch, watching snowflakes drift toward the river. You okay? He smiled without turning around. I was remembering the first night. The AirPods. He nodded. I've replayed that week 1,000 times. So have I. If I had just trusted you enough to tell you everything. I gently interrupted. Him. If I had trusted you enough to ask before assuming. He looked at me. We could do this forever. What? Keep rewriting the past. I stepped beside him. But we don't live there anymore. For a long moment, we watched the river flow beneath the winter sky. Finally, Ethan reached into his coat pocket. I laughed. Please tell me that's not another secret. He grinned. No, this time it's a tradition. He handed me the pink AirPods case. You keep it. I raised an eyebrow. Why me? Because every marriage has a story. This one reminds us what happens when fear speaks louder than love. I closed my fingers around the little case. It no longer represented suspicion. It represented grace, forgiveness, growth. When everyone had gone home, Emily's handmade drawing still hung on our refrigerator. The people who stayed. I looked at it one last time before turning off the kitchen light. Some families are built by blood. Others are built by promises. Ours have been built by something quieter, by difficult conversations, by second chances, by choosing honesty when silence seemed easier. As I walked upstairs with Ethan beside me, I realized the greatest miracle of our story had never been that we survived one misunderstanding. It was that we had learned how to keep choosing each other long after the misunderstanding was gone. And somehow, that choice felt new every single day. 1 year later, the pink AirPods case still sat on the bookshelf. Visitors never asked about it. To everyone else, it was just another forgotten piece of technology. To us, it was a reminder that the smallest moments can change an entire life. Not because of what they are, but because of the stories we choose to tell ourselves about them. On the first Saturday of January, Ethan and I stood in the same neighborhood coffee shop where Lily and I had met for the first time. The same wooden tables. The same rain tapping softly against the windows. Only this time, nothing felt heavy. Emily rushed toward us carrying a folder almost as big as she was. I have something. She carefully pulled out a sheet of paper covered with neat handwriting. My teacher asked us to write about our heroes. She handed it to Ethan. He smiled as he began reading. Halfway down the page, he suddenly stopped. His eyes filled with tears. What is it? I asked. Without speaking, he handed the paper to me. The final paragraph read, Asterisk, people think my hero is a firefighter because he saved me from fire. But that isn't why he's my hero. He's my hero because he stayed after everyone else went home. Asterisk, I looked up. Emily shrugged, as though she had simply written the truth. I wanted everyone to know. Ethan pulled her into a hug. I don't deserve this. She smiled. I think you do. A few months later, on a bright spring afternoon, Ethan and I stood beneath a canopy of flowering cherry trees in Washington Park. Only our closest friends and family surrounded us. Rachel adjusted my veil. Captain Reynolds straightened Ethan's tie one final time. Lily held Emily's hand in the front row. When the officiant asked who supported our marriage, every voice answered together. We do. I looked around at the faces smiling back at us. Some had entered our lives through joy, others through heartbreak. Every one of them had become part of our story. When it came time to exchange vows, Ethan took my hands. I used to think love meant protecting you from every burden. He smiled softly. Now I know love means trusting you enough to carry those burdens beside me. I swallowed back tears. When my turn came, I looked directly into his eyes. I promised to ask before I assume. I promised to speak before silence grows. And I promised that no matter what tomorrow brings, I'll keep choosing us. There was no applause until after we kissed. Just quiet tears, quiet smiles. The kind of silence that exists only when every heart present understands exactly what words cannot fully express. That evening, our wedding reception was held in the backyard of the White House overlooking the Columbia River. String lights glowed above the garden. Children chased one another across the lawn. Music drifted through the warm evening air. Emily walked onto the small wooden deck carrying a wrapped gift. This is for both of you. Inside was a simple wooden picture frame, instead of a photograph. It contained one of her childhood drawings. Only this time the people were older. Ethan, me, Lily, Emily, and, tucked into the corner, Smokey. Above the drawing, she had written 4 words. The people who chose love. I looked at Ethan. Neither of us could speak. We didn't need to. Years later, whenever friends asked how we met or how we survived the hardest season of our relationship, We never started with a misunderstanding. We started with a lesson. That trust is not built because two people never make mistakes. It is built because they decide that honesty will always arrive before fear has the final word. The AirPods eventually stopped working. Phones were replaced. Cars were traded in. The little pink case faded with time. But we never threw it away, because it reminded us that every relationship reaches a moment when love must decide whether to hide or to tell the truth. And every day after that first difficult conversation, we chose the truth. Together. The end.